Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Quadruple D. And this is a show within a show in the Critical Wave Theory podcast. And this is episode 71, part 3. And as promised, I will be looking a little bit at John McCain and his biggest scandal. And this ties into the last episode in this series because the former Republican Congressman David Trott, who I did an episode on, was a major donor to the Republican National Committee and the presidential campaign of John McCain. So remember, he was the peripheral poop head in that last segment that I did. And now this is what I call the Fetid Fever Dream flashback, and I'm looking at John McCain and the Keating 5 scandal. Now, look, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this scandal. I just assembled these notes. And if you have any sort of corrections on the details or any elaborations that might, be good to know, feel free to get a hold of me online. My email address is wadewinio@gmail.com. You could probably find me on social media. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm even on Mastodon, although I rarely ever post on Mastodon. But you have ways of getting a hold of me if you really, really want to. And the most significant scandal of John McCain's political career was probably his involvement in the Keating 5 scandal during the savings and loan, or S&L, crisis of the late 1980s. Now, you could maybe say that John McCain's warmongering overall is a bigger scandal, but this is one of the ones that people will point to as sort of the most obvious one. So, what was the Keating 5 scandal? Well, according to the notes that I've gathered, in the mid 1980s, Charles Keating Jr., chairman of the Lincoln Savings and Loan Association, made $112,000 in campaign contributions to McCain, funded multiple vacation trips for McCain and his family to the Bahamas, and went into business with John McCain's second wife and father in law. When federal regulators at the Federal Home Loan Bank Board began investigating Lincoln's savings and loan for risky investments and fraudulent practices, Keating called on 5 U.S. senators to whom he had donated heavily. That's including John McCain, the sole Republican, oddly enough, and Democrats Alan Cranston, Dennis DeConcini, John Glenn, and Donald Regal, or Regal, however that's pronounced. In 1987, the 5 senators held meetings with banking regulators to push back against the investigation. Well, isn't that nice? Flexing power there, apparently. Lincoln Savings and Loan collapsed in 1989, bankrupting 23,000 investors, many of whom lost their life savings, and forcing a federal taxpayer bailout of over $3 billion. dollars. A Senate Ethics Committee investigation concluded in 1991 that McCain showed poor judgment in meeting with regulators, though he was cleared of criminal wrongdoing. Well, isn't that convenient? Isn't that nice? McCain reimbursed Keating for the trips, paid $112,000 back to the U.S. Treasury, and later described the incident as the worst mistake of his life. And again, isn't that convenient? He got a chance to make amends, didn't have to spend a single day in a cell or anything like that, never went to trial. It was just, like brushing dust off his shoulder, or lint off his shoulder. That's kind of what it was like. So, as I so often do in these segments, what would the sort of radical anarchic assessment of this scandal look like? Well, from a silly Billy anarchic perspective, the Keating 5 scandal is not an anomaly or an isolated personal failure, but it seems like a predictable demonstration of how state power so often operates. And anarchist theory analyzes the incident through several key frameworks if you were to, work this out logically. So, There is an inevitable collusion of state and capital. So, anarchism posits that the primary function of the state is to enforce and protect concentrated private wealth and power. Rather than viewing Keating's influence as corruption that infected an otherwise neutral government, anarchism would cynically perhaps view the state as inherently corrupt because its structure incentivizes the rich to buy legislative and regulatory protection. So the scandal actually highlights how politicians, regardless of their party, so often function as managers for capital interests. And wouldn't you know, that's exactly what this scandal looks like. So, as I so often have to note here, it's like some of these politicians and these scandals were tailor made to make the anarchic critiques of power seem valid. You know, isn't that weird? It's almost like they're onto something in these radical critiques of power and the allegations that the system corrupts people and that leads us down a darkened path, and that we have unaccountable institutions as a result, and so on and so forth. I could go on and on. You've also got privatized profits and socialized losses here. The mechanics of the SNL collapse illustrate the coercive nature of state sanctioned financial institutions. Keating and corporate elites extracted massive wealth through their high risk speculation enabled by federal deregulation. And when the scheme collapsed, the state stepped in to bail out the system using public funds extracted through taxation, forcing working class citizens to bear the cost of their private greed. Well, isn't that nice? It's another gentle reminder of what private greed actually entails so often. Again, privatized profits, socialized losses. Isn't it beautiful? It could just make you sing a nice little song about how beautiful our system works. Beautifully, our system works. Sorry, that was grammatically off. Anyway, the illusion of systemic self correction is another factor here. Following the scandal, McCain rebranded himself as a maverick reformer and championed the bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002, often referred to as McCain Feingold. So that all sounds fine and good, but us pain in the rump anarchic types would critique these reformist measures, like these campaign finance laws, as more performative legitimization rituals. Such reforms give the public the illusion that the state can regulate its own corruption adequately while leaving intact the foundational structures of state power and wage labor that enable elite capture in the first place. That's really one of the key things here. What actually leads to such corruption in the first place? It seems like you could cut out the middleman, have fewer scandals if the public, if the working class and consumers just had more direct say in how society functions, more worker control, more direct democracy in the workplace, and when it comes to industry. I mean, what a radical concept, I know, but how is it really um, the case that you're going to regulate all of these problems away when the system actually keeps on rewarding a lot of these people for their corruption? In a lot of cases, like John McCain, obviously, he you could barely even say he got a slap on the wrist. It might have been like a little index finger tapping his wrist, rather than like a full one of those. Like that actually kind of hurt my wrist a little bit. Like I don't know if you can hear that. I'm slapping my wrist because I've been a bad boy. You know, um, that actually kind of hurts more than what John McCain probably got from this. It was a little bit of public shame, I'm sure, But like again, why can't we just skip the middleman, have more direct democratic control over uh, how life happens in the United States? It seems like that could. I mean, you're probably still gonna have scandals of some type, but it'd be nice if we didn't have to worry about uh, campaign finance rules and stuff like that. If people just had direct democracy, um, that's still something that I champion. I know that's a long way off, probably, but I still advocate for it, even if it falls on deaf ears. Because I like the idea of you know people not having to uh, wait for good things to happen on the freakish chance that some politician is actually going to do something right. Why can't consumers um, be properly educated on the issues and actually have a say more in what happens. That's it's not like they're all incapable of understanding the issues. I mean, look at the politicians themselves; they don't understand the issues half the time either. So uh, they're kind of put into these positions of power to give industry a lot of leeway in what they can do and what they can get away with. And it's like the wolf running the hen house or something like that. Well, the fox. I'm getting off track here. The saying is usually the fox in the hen house. I said the wolf for some reason, but anyway, you've also got the self-preservation of the ruling class exemplified in the story. The ethics committee's mild finding of poor judgment for McCain and the others, alongside minimal penalties for the other senators, reflects how state institutions prioritize protecting their own legitimacy over real accountability, while working class people face severe penal consequences. Uh, I should have worded that differently. Penal sounds, well, it sounds a little bit phallic. Anyway, severe penalties for minor economic survival offenses like petty theft. The political class faced mild rhetorical rebukes for enabling a multi-billion-dollar theft. So think about that. You go into the store. I mean, I'm not saying you should do this, but if you were to go in there and like steal a candy bar, you could end up with some serious jail time. Yet here was John McCain and these other people involved in what, by all appearances, is like theft. And again, just a tiny little slap on the wrist, barely even hurt. Anyway, that's it for this episode. If you've got any corrections, if you're a defender of John McCain or something like that, go ahead and let me know. Let me know like why I should be uh, loving John McCain and everything he stood for. Uh, Go ahead and do that. I might be in the mood for a good laugh.